December 7th, 1939, Raate Road, Kainuu, Finland. Night presses down like iron. The thermometers at the border outposts have fallen past minus 30 degrees Celsius, and the forest cracks with the slow, brittle sounds of trees shrinking in the cold. Corporal Eino Korhonen, 23, white smock over a wool tunic with a blue and white cockade on his cap, kneels in the ditch beside a snow-choked road. His M/28-30 rifle lies across his knees. Frost has dusted the sights white. He can taste the metal in the air, diesel exhaust traveling ahead of unseen engines, and he can smell it too, a dull ribbon of warmth and food and men. Soviet field kitchens moving again, somewhere beyond the bend. Beside him, a Suomi KP/-31 gunner checks the bolt with a gloved thumb. Another man rubs a bottle in his mittens, a petrol, tar Molotov, fuse-taped and crusted with ice. Far off, a truck grinds down to a lower gear and horses snort, steam rising from their muzzles like ghosts. The order comes as a whisper. Let them pass the pine snag. Take the kitchens first. The Finns sink lower, white on white, invisible except for their breath. A column of the 163rd Rifle Division is feeling its way forward through the black spruce, stretched thin along a road that is the only path through 100 kilometers of forest. Eino glances at the trees, straight, close, ancient, and wonders, if the road is a lifeline, what happens when the forest learns how to cut? The road the Russians call Raate is less a ribbon than a wound opening into Finland, slicing east to west through country that resists the very idea of map lines. On November 30th, 1939, the Red Army had come across the border with brigades and loudspeakers and lists of what would be different now. Their advance is here in the north, the 163rd Rifle Division pressing towards Suomussalmi, and the 44th Rifle Division coming behind with fuel, fodder, and food brought more men and metal than any local garrison could hope to meet on open ground. But there was no open ground. There was only forest and ice and night. From the pines comes a scrape of wood on wood. Skis, dozens of pairs, held still, ready to slide. Finnish troops of the 9th Division, Eversti Colonel Hjalmar Siilasvuo's men, have learned to read this road like a hunter tracks a wounded elk. They study the distances between trucks, the frequency of the horse drovers' calls, the way warmth pools behind the kitchen sleds, and how guards grow careless when their fingers stop obeying orders. They know that in this cold, a man moves slower unless he moves with purpose. They move with purpose. Earlier in Suomussalmi village, the Red Army had taken houses and schoolrooms, fired the stovepipes hot, and pinned maps to walls where children once learned grammar. For a few days it looked like the Soviet offensive might simply roll westward. But the Finns didn't try to throw them back with trenches. They began cutting the road instead, creating Motti's wood piles, the old word for a stack of cut logs ready for the hearth. Simple in name, vicious in effect. Isolate a piece of the column, surrounding the trees, starve of fuel, food, and heat, and then decide when to burn it down. Eino's platoon slid here on forest skis, long and narrow, the white oversmock stretching from chin to ankle. They wear felt boots, layered socks, and on some feet, homemade toss-it-over shows. Faces are smeared with ash to dull the shine where the frost hasn't already done it. Their mess tins rattle softly in rucksacks with hardtack and salt pork. Several carry Ladisalrana M/26 light machine guns. They learned early to wrap oil bottles in wool, so the lubricant wouldn't thicken the glue. The Molotov bottles have rag fuses, carried close to the body, so they'll light. The Soviet column approaches. ZS-5 trucks, GAZA lorries, horse sled straining, and the ominous square silhouettes of T-26 light tanks with their riveted hulls and thin armor, paint already crazed with cold. Tank tracks squeal metal on ice. Drivers peer from barely cracked hatches, cheeks raw and eyes reddened. Somewhere in the middle, under canvas, the kitchens, kettles of kasha and soup, the only warm thing for 20 kilometers. A signal, a flick of mittened fingers, rippled down the ditch. Wait. The lieutenant had said an hour ago, the map spread on his knees, the compass needle trembling. We take the kitchens and the fuel. No warm food, no engines, no fight, and no noise until we can't help it. His scarf was rhymed stiff. The breath in his beard had frozen into needles, and his voice carried the dry rasp of lungs that had been sucking winter for days. Move like the trees. Don't think of the whole war. Think of the section, the Motti. The first sled reaches the pine snag, a split trunk leaning like a pointing finger, and Aino rises one slow motion, as if he himself were a pine. The Suomi gunner comes up too, barrel steady on the ditch lip. A grenade arcs and thuds into the soft snow under the lead truck. The blast is swallowed, more thump than crack, and the truck slews, axle biting into a drift. In the same breath, 3 Molotovs blossom like vicious little suns along the canvas of the nearest kitchen sled. Fire runs like a frightened thing along the seams, then settles to feed. A shout from the column. Stoy! Boots hit the snow. The Finns answer with short bursts, not prolonged fire, learned habit. At these temperatures, barrels can cool too fast or crack if soaked and heated hastily. The snow reflects muzzle flashes like fireworks swallowed by a pillow. The horses rear and pull, eyes rolling white, and somewhere behind, a young Red Army private, far from Gorky, screams for his mother as boiling soup tips and steam turns to ice crystals midair. The Finns withdraw almost as quickly as they appeared, gliding backward into trees, legs scissoring in long, practiced strokes. They lift their skis just enough to avoid the loud zipper sound that fresh snow makes under weight. Aino leads a squad up a shallow ravine where tamaracks close around them. The Soviets fire into the dark, but the tracers disappear into trunks, and the bullet snaps seem to come from everywhere. The road is a spine. The Finns have broken a rib. By dawn that comes late and gray, the column is stuck in more than one place. A few hundred meters behind the burned kitchens, another section of the road has been felled with trees in the night. An interlaced barricade of trunks, branches, and snow, a living abatis that will take hours to saw, axe, or blast apart. And another Motti lies farther back, this time around a cluster of fuel trucks with hand pumps frozen in their housings. Men crowd around fires, rubbing hands and stamping boots, and the commissar shouts orders through a scarf that crusts his mouth with each sentence. The tanks idle, choking, wasting gasoline, try and keep oil fluid enough to move. The temperature punishes any impulse that is not survival. In the trees, the Finns eat hot soup from a field pot hung low over a brief fire, screens of spruce branches erected to catch the light. They break the ice on their canteens with the butts of their knives. A runner from battalion arrives with a stiff envelope pressed under his tunic for warmth, bearing Siilasvuo's instructions and the latest information from snow scouts who moved on skis through the black hours, reading the Soviet line like more sent by engine noises. The message, more columns in the east, 44th Division in depth. Cut again. No frontal assaults. Keep the forests. The impossible problem lays itself out with winter clarity. Fewer Finns, fewer rifles, no heavy armor, no ability to meet brigades in open ground. But the land has rules of its own, and the Finns know them. Skis move faster than boots. White cloth vanishes where green-gray uniforms make men look like moving targets on a chessboard. Heat is a weapon, and so is the lack of it. A truck without fuel is a bunker. A tank without a warm crew is a coffin. A column stretched in the woods is not a fist. It is a string, and strings tangle. A platoon sergeant, face carved into lines that might be age or just the wind, taps the map with a pencil stub. Here, he says, and here. 2 more cuts, 2 more little fires in the dark. He thinks of his wife in Kajani, a silk scarf he promised to bring from Helsinki, the way the kitchen smelled when rye bread came out of the oven. He folds the map and says the thing everyone is thinking. We don't beat them with bullets. We beat them with road and cold. By midday, December 7th, the Soviet regimental commander finds himself commanding islands. He can send orders up and down the road, but they move at the pace of fear, messengers dodging into snowbanks when they hear a crack, trucks backing into drifts, drivers banging gloved fists on steering wheels to get feeling back. The radio sets made for room temperature rooms complain and die, the batteries losing their will. He reports that the enemy is in the trees. He cannot report how many, because he does not know. The white shapes are a rumor that becomes a volley and then becomes missing men. In a break between actions, Aino leans against a trunk and closes his eyes for the luxury of 20 seconds. He hears his section talking low. The Suomi gunner counting magazines. The boy with the Molotovs whispering a prayer he learned from his grandmother. A rifleman making a joke about how even the Russian's breath is defecting to Finland. Aino smiles despite himself. When he opens his eyes, snow is falling, the fine, dry kind that makes a sound like silk when you brush it from your sleeve. He thinks of the village of Suomussalmi, of charred rafters and smashed school desks, of the empty picture frames on a wall where a family once kept their faces. He thinks of a line his lieutenant said, "We hold the line by not standing on it." By dusk, the day's work looks like a series of bruises along the road. Blackened sleds, a truck skewed in a jackknife, a light tank idling in a cul-de-sac of snow where its tracks spun and polished the ice until it became an invisible hill. The Soviet infantry digging on the road margins, bayonets fixed because cold is a kind of fear and steel makes men believe in straight answers. But the answers here are crooked. The enemy who will not show a straight front, a battle without a center. Night returns like a lid. The aurora walks faintly behind the clouds, a rumor of green that never breaks through. Somewhere farther west, villagers who evacuated with sleighs and wrapped babies in reindeer skins huddle in barns and pray the wind will not shift. The forest keeps its counsel. The Finns move again, skis whispering, cutting a new gap, building a new Motti. The Red Army is not beaten. It has hardly begun to fight, but it is learning an unkind truth about this road in this season against these men. You can march into a forest and still be outside the battle. Aino's squad comes to a halt at a ridge of snow shaped by weeks of wind. He signals for quiet, then points. The glow of another kitchen fire, too bright, too hopeful, flickers just beyond a copse of spruce. He can almost hear the clink of ladles. He looks at the glass bottle under his parka. He thinks of the warmth he is about to extinguish. There is no joy in it, only duty. He raises his hand and counts down with his fingers. The wind, for a moment, drops. The trees listen. If a column cannot eat and cannot move, how long before an army disappears? Not from a map, but into the trees? December 10th, 1939. Suomussalmi church ruin, Kainuu, Finland. Ash sifts down through a roofless nave. In the shell of the village church, a white-shrouded Finnish medic corporal, Ela Niemi, cups a man's frost-burned hands and breathes on his fingers until the skin pales from black to gray. Outside, the wind carries the moan of engines that won't start and men who won't stop. Colonel Hjalmar Siilasvuo stands where the pulpit used to be, map pinned against a charred beam with a bayonet. He listens to three messengers talk over one another. Ammo, fuel, rations. Each message shorter than the problem it represents. From the road, a Soviet flare pops and hisses, painting the forest in a sickly star. We keep cutting, Siilasvuo says at last, voice even. We cut until they cannot count the pieces. Ayla ties off a bandage and looks up at him, a question in her eyes. But how long can we bleed for the cutting? The Mottis multiply like stoked embers catching in dry pine. Ski companies slip through backwoods logging paths and over half-frozen marshes, their white smocks smudged with soot, their breath pluming in steady rhythm. They strike where the line thins, then vanish, leaving the Soviets with problems that look like chance but were measured out with compasses and habit. The Finns have become cartographers of hunger. Yet beneath the confidence of execution lies a field of doubts. Ammunition runs lean, 62 times 54 MMR stripper clips rattling in cloth bandoliers like hollow bones. Lottie Salarana M/26 gunners baby their weapons, aware a clogged recoil spring can turn a squad's backbone to dead weight. Even a robust Suomi KP/-31 must be kept dry. Gunners carry extra bolts close to the body for warmth. And the Molotov cocktails, a name born of a bitter joke about the Soviet foreign minister's food aid radio claims, are cheap and effective. But a man stepping toward a tank with a glass bottle and a rag is always one slip from becoming his own fire. At a snow-choked siding off the main track, a Finnish platoon leader, Luneni, LT, Katunen, argues with a company commander over a pencil-drawn overlay. We can't hold a ring. He taps the sketch where the road kinks toward a swamp. Not tight, not for hours. We hit, we pull, we hit again. That's how. The captain's answer is practical and bleak. If the 163rd punches through, Suomussalmi becomes a corridor. If the 44th Division reaches them with fuel, we chase ghosts until January. Across the Motti, inside a felled timber hedgehog defended by tripods and snow berms, the Soviet 163rd Rifle Division feels skepticism of its own, raw and dangerous. Major Ivan Gorokov, cheeks cracked to blood, pulls his coat collar up and listens to a political officer spout rhetoric that freezes before it reaches the men's ears. They need calories, not slogans. Maxim M1910 machine guns sit under crusted canvas. Crews beat the water jackets to keep ice from locking the lids. 45mm anti-tank guns wait for targets that slide away like fish. The T-26 crews light charcoal in braziers shoved under engine compartments, praying heat will seep up into the oil. One tank commander rubs a religious icon with thumb. He swears is numb forever. The commissar glares and then looks away. There are larger sins to chase today. Listen, Gorokov says to his adjutant. Both men hunch over field radio wheezing static. They are not strong. They are everywhere. He winces at the truth of it. He orders reconnaissance patrols into the trees, for men, then 8, then squads, because a commander has to answer fog in one direction by sending men into another. Few patrols come back intact. Those that do return with stories that sound like folklore. White figures who move without sound. Shots that come from snowdrifts. Fires that bloom and die like winter flowers. Siilasvuo's plan tightens. A detachment from a 27th Infantry Regiment interdicts the road where a bridge dips toward a brook that doesn't freeze because water insists on moving even in Kainuu. Sappers with satchel charges crawl under the near span on their bellies, their breath fogging the wood. They plant the charge, pull the fuse, and lay flat, feeling the timber thrum before it shatters into 1,000 sticks. The next Soviet convoy finds a hole where a path should be. Men stare at it as if it might fill itself with the force of their wanting. The Finn skepticism takes a different shape. It is a second heartbeat in the chest, a question asked each time they melt into the trees after an attack. Are we ghosts, or are we only men who will tire? Eino Korhonen squad moves by bearing and memory, counting strokes between landmarks. Heat builds under their layers, then is stripped away at halts. Sweat the enemy they fear as much as bullets. Frostbite here is a tactical fact. Men learn to wiggle toes in step, to flex fingers even when fists want to clench around stocks. On a ridge above the road, Ayla and 2 stretcher-bearers establish a collection point behind a screen of boughs. They warm morphine ampoules under an armpit before snapping necks and loading syringes with hands that shake not with fear, but with a tremble of body heat in deficit. A Soviet conscript stumbles in with hands up, lips blue, repeating a single Finnish word he learned an hour earlier. Visai, water. Ayla gives him a measure and sees his eyes reset from animal panic to something like human gratitude. She wraps his hands in wool. War has a way of making enemies temporarily interchangeable. With the men, you would save if you could. Night. Wind finds seams in clothing and chews at them until the seams fight back or split. The Soviets try coordinated pushes, blowing whistles, and sending rifle companies to pry apart the snow walls. The Finns reply with the geometry of ambush. 2 LS-26S kneeling at a slant to each other, their cones of fire overlapping on the road's crown, riflemen raking the ditches. A hand-cranked field telephone buzzes with a faint, insectal sound between the ambush point and a relay post, lines strung low and hidden in the brush to avoid the axe-happy curiosity of enemy patrols. 5 minutes of brutality, then whitebacks retreating, skis lifting and setting like a metronome that ticks in silence. Fires burn on the road. Kitchens first, as ordered, until the Red Army learns to cook low and hidden. Kettles blacken and lash the sled runners to damp the gleam. They learn other things, too, to send skirmish lines out ahead with bayonets probing the snow for traps, to hold their fire until they see a muzzle flash, and then pour Maxim belts into that rectangle of dark like a curse. The Finns counter by moving the flash, a man pulling a string to trip a spare rifle strap to a sapling 20 meters left of where the squad waits, a wooden puppet show that buys space in seconds. One afternoon, December 14th, a gust tears open the sky, the clouds lifting like a veil. The sun comes low and white. On the road, a T-26 with its turret hatch wedged with frozen bar lurches forward, Emboldened by a brief run of clear sight, Ano and the Molotov man flatten. At the tank's back deck, the engines louver stain the snow with a heat mirage. Now, Ano says, not shouting, only lending the word the weight of necessity. The bottle arcs and smashes. Fire creeps in, then roars, and the crew explodes in the hatch, coats smoking, faces horror-bright. The Finns do not cheer. They slip away, leaving the tank to burn down to a black monument. Later, Soviet infantry will circle it for warmth, a shrine to bad planning and good luck ill-spent. Doubts pile on both sides. In Oulu, a long way west, but close in the minds of men who pray for supply, staff officers tally rifle cartridges and horse fodder like misers and ask whether Siilasvuo risks too much by refusing set-piece battle. The colonel answers with the only arithmetic that matters here. Distance multiplied by cold equals isolation. He sends orders along with polka sleds, rotate ambush squads before exhaustion makes mistakes, share dry socks as if they were ammunition, keep fires small and massed, conserve Suomi drums for decisive moments, and above, all press the cord, tighten each Motti until breath itself becomes an enemy within the Soviet lines. In a snow-churned levy east of Suomussalmi, Major Gorakov has his own reckoning. He gathers company commanders around a hood map, a smooth canvas over a truck bonnet, frozen to the metal, and traces with cold-blunted pencil the knots where the road has turned on them. We will form defense perimeters here, and here, he says, tapping. We send a spear west, volunteers only, fast. Find the junction. Take a Finnish prisoner who knows which church stands and which falls. We must know where the center is. A captain mutters that in this place the center is the cold. Gorakov pretends not to hear. He volunteers himself. For the Finns, the hard part is not courage. It is continuity. Pattern must become discipline in men who haven't slept enough to remember their own names. Ano's squad returns to a prearranged cache. Ammunition wrapped in wax paper, potato sacks of bread, and sausage frozen to bricks. They thaw what they can against stomachs while the sentry stares into the trees and counts to 40 before blinking. Ayla dozes sitting up, the metal of her stethoscope biting her neck through the scarf. A runner shakes her awake, not with orders, but with a mug of something hot. She drinks and discovers tears in her eyes. The body's rebellion against the idea that warmth should be rare. The skepticism that began this phase evolves into doctrine. The men stop asking if this will work, and begin asking only how long they can keep it working. They steal horse fodder to feed their own ponies. They lift felt boots from captured stores and pass them to those whose toes are a bad hour from black. They leave leaflets along the ditches in bad Russian. Warm food, warm fire, this way. Some Soviet soldiers follow the promise and lay down their rifles. Others follow and attempt to shoot, and discover an empty ring that closes only when it wants to. A weather change comes, a violent snow squall, then a sullen quiet. Siilasvuo stands again in the ruined church, and hears the forest breathing. Report arrived that the 44th Rifle Division is close, dragging guns and wagons toward Raate Road with an obstinacy that is almost admirable, a parade marching straight into a maze. If the 44th links with the 163rd, the Mottis dissolve into a thread too thick to sever. If the Finns can keep the roads cut and the fires fed, then winter will become a strategy instead of a season. On a stretch of road where the snowbanks rise taller than men, Ano kneels with his squad, skis planted upright like white spears. He checks faces, cracked lips, red rim eyes, the slack that means a mind is drifting to sleep in a place that punishes dreamers. One more, he says. We make one more cut. Then we eat. Someone laughs softly. It sounds like a man discovering the joke of his own survival. A flare goes up, Soviet, green bleeding to white. The light drips across the trees. For a moment, everyone on both sides sees everyone else. Clear as if painted. The Finns low and spare. The Soviets bunched in brace, horses steaming, a tank belly smoking to keep oil from freezing to stone. The flare dies, and with it, certainty. The forest closes again. The struggle has settled into a rhythm. Pain, precision, withdrawal. Cold, courage, doubt. Cut, starve, wait. Beneath it all, a current tugs the battle toward a single question neither side can ignore much longer. When the bigger army arrives, Who has more road left, the invader or the men who have learned to unmake a road with silence? December 27th, 1939. Shore of Kianajarvi, east of Suomussalmi, Finland. The lake is a black sheet pressed under moonlight, its surface groaning like a living thing as pressure ridges creep and split. Eino Koronen lies flat on his belly on the ice. Skis off and lashed his rucksack, fingers spread to distribute weight. Beside him, two men inch forward with a coil of field telephone wire, paying out across the wind-polished glaze. Far out on the dark, a Soviet convoy crawls along the shore road. Headlights hooded, horses blowing plumes, a T-26 leading, its track teeth ticking on bare ice. Eino can see the thin line his men carved through the drift 2 nights ago, the place where the road vanishes into snow, and the lake's edge looks like a road to an eye that wants it to be. A whisper in his ear, when the engine hits the seam, throw. His mitten closes on the bottle's sticky tape. The ice moans. The convoy commits. The lake holds its breath. What breaks first? The hinge of the battle does not look like a flag planted on a map. It looks like a dozen unremarkable acts that begin to rhyme. Siilasvuo's 9th Division, stripped, improvised, fed by sledge trains from the west, tightens its grip not by building a wall, but by unlearning it. Columns that once had freedom of the road wait to find that freedom narrowed to a lane wide enough for a cart and no wider. The 163rd Rifle Division has eaten through its stores. Its command posts speak of temporary inconvenience, but the word temporary freezes differently here. Raate Road is becoming less a road and more a question the Red Army cannot answer quickly enough. On December 25th, while men on both sides mark a holiday with whatever ritual the cold will permit, a half-song, a crust of bread, a quick sign of the cross hidden in a mitten, Siilasvuo moves reinforced ski detachments north of the village to cut the last reliable cart track threading the woods. By afternoon, the church ruins of Suomussalmi sit like a charcoal sketch against a sky gone the color of old tin. Patrols report that the Soviet garrison inside the village is thinning. Fuel drums emptying, field kitchens cold more often than hot. In a house that once held grammar lessons, a Soviet clerk writes requisitions for non-existent stores with a pencil that is frozen twice. Outside, Finnish sappers with sledge charges bite at the roads that might save the 163rd. The turning point also has a sound, the stall cough of engines that cannot be coaxed alive. The T-26 crews have burned spare slat benches to warm oil pans. Men stand in clusters around braziers made from cut ammunition tins, eyes streaming from smoke that tastes of tar and desperation. The commissar insists that an attack will break the ring, because doctrine says encirclement fails when the encircling force tires. Doctrine never put on skis. On the night of December 27th, Lieutenant Katunen gathers Eino's squad and 2 others in a stand of spruce that breaks the wind. He draws lines in the snow with a glove knife. We push a wire across Kianajarvi, he says, to bring the field phone to the south shore. There, our signal will lift the trigger. 2 satchel charges built into the ice seam and the drift. If luck runs with us, the lead tank opens a gap and blocks the road. He pauses, the white scarf rhymed stiff against his breath. We do this quiet. I don't want the lake to hear us. They move in pairs onto the ice, bodies low, the line paying out behind like a vein. Ayla Nimi waits behind the tree screen with a stretcher and a small lantern hooded with a rag. The light, so faint it could be mistaken for a sigh. She checks morphine ampoules under her arm and rehearses the path back to the collection point. She has learned the geometry of triage in timber. Who can be moved now? Who must be warmed first? Who can be left with a priest she does not have? The convoy round the curve. A Soviet sergeant on the foremost sled slaps his driver's shoulder and points ahead. The road looks wrong, the bank blown by wind into a smooth shelf. The lead T-26 grumbles and commits. Turret hatch clamped half open to vent fumes. The ice line, shaved thin by Finnish augers at dusk, takes the weight. Eino feels the vibration through his chest. The field phone line twitches in his hand. Katunen, hidden in the spruce on the far shore, speaks into the handset like a man trying not to wake a sleeping child. Now, the charges lift the drift and the ice in the same breath. Not a cinematic blast. Just an ugly heave and a lunge. The tank's left track falling through the water, the right track grinding on nothing. It slews sideways and drops, up to the belly in black glass, steam shrieking. The sled behind jackknives. Horse's rear, hooves slipping, eyes rolling white. Ano rises and throws his bottle toward the tank's rear deck. Fire catches the engine louvers like a fox catching a hen. The crew erupts, coats aflame, and dive onto ice that hisses their names. The Finns do not stay. 2 short rakes of Suomi fire, crisp, controlled, stitch the road edge where a machine gun might appear. Then they slither backward, skis back on, heels digging, retreating into a darkness that was already their home. Behind them, the stopped tank becomes a plug in the artery. Men pile up. Commands crash into each other. The convoy, kitchens, fodder, drums, turns from a line into a stack, a Motti born in 10 seconds. At dawn, the lake steams where the tank warmed a hole. The air is minus 32 degrees Celsius, the kind of cold that makes eyelashes stick and snatches sound out of mouth before words can grow into orders. Across the day, Finnish detachments peel that new Motti-like bark. LS/26 S-pin Soviet riflemen who try to throw a bridge of sleds around the wreck. The 163 RD's response is brave and clumsy. A platoon-level push here, a Maxim there, a 45 millimeters poked forward by hand until it can bark once and be abandoned when return fire hits its crew. Horses die standing. Their carcasses become ad hoc bulwarks for men who did not plan on barricades of meat. In the village, the garrison that once warmed itself at sea stoves is down to half rations and melted ice. That afternoon, a Finnish company from JR-27 schemes along a narrow cut north of town and slides through gardens that were a summer ago tamed with care. A boy's sled sits half buried by a fence, a rope still tied to the runner. The company breaks the back door of the schoolhouse and finds a radio with its faceplate smashed and a blackboard scrawled with Cyrillic, numbers meaning nothing now. They move room to room, silent except for the soft tap of ski poles against floorboards. By nightfall, Suomussalmi is a ruin that belongs to no one and everyone. Finnish patrols like wind, Soviet pockets like dusk. The hinge swings wider on December 28th to 29th. Siilasvuo senses it not from a single report, but from a change in the messages themselves. Soviet signals grow hasty, directions vague, references to units that no longer answer. He orders a concentric tightening, not a frontal storm, but a drawstring pulled on 5 knots at once. At the east approaches, ski troops roll the road with felled spruce, then lie in the snow behind their own work and listen to axes on the other side like carpenters in a house that's already burning. Inside a Soviet perimeter south of the village, Major Gorokov, eyes red, beard heavy with frost, leans over a hood map and accepts the obvious. Relief is not coming tonight. He has sent runners east toward the 44th Rifle Division and received back 2 men and a rumor. The 44th is on the road, wagons and trucks strung out for kilometers, guns sunk to hubs in drifts that swallow boots. He decides on a breakout to the east, a spear that might reach the 44th's forward elements or at least break the spiral into which his division is collapsing. He orders companies to assemble on the road at moonrise, quiet, no songs, no slogans. Ano's squad watches the road bend from the timberline. They can feel the decision in the air, the way men move when they've chosen between 2 kinds of death. Katunin speaks low. They will try to go east. We do not hold them by weight. We hold them by direction. He points with his ski pole. We cut here, and then we let the woods take their momentum. The breakout begins with a hissing of sled runners and a ripple of bayonets catching moon. For a moment, the Soviet column moves like something alive. Then the first cut, a gap where the road should be, is upon them, and they pour into it thinking it's shallow and flounder. The second cut finds them bunched. Finnish fire cracks open the first ranks, and then is still. Silence is a trap's other jaw. Horses rear. Men choke on the steam of their own number. A.T. 26 lurches into a tree, turret ringing like a bell. Gorokov steps onto the bank to drag men into order, and is knocked flat by a bullet that slaps his coat and takes nothing of him a breath. He gasps and reaches for purchase, and finds a spruce branch slick with rime. He stands. He orders forward. To his left, a Maxim wakes, and the scream of its belt is the one sound that is not frozen. By dawn of December 29th, The eastward spear has blunted into a ragged wedge lodged in the woods. The 44th is still only a rumor with wheels. Siilasvuo throws a fresh ski company into a scene that opens as the Soviets recoil. They do not waste men in frontal-slag. They shepherd. They let cold and hunger do half the work, and fire do the rest. In the village streets, 2 planks laid over snow where a sidewalk used to be. Finnish pioneers clear houses with grenades cupped like apples. Ayla and her bearers shuttle between doorframes, finding Finns and Soviets in equal measure, wrapping hands and tucking hot stones under armpits because heat is medicine before morphine is. Evening comes early. The soot-black bell from the ruined church lies on its side in the snow, its mouth packed with drift. A Finnish squad tips it and listens to the thud. "Hollow," someone says. Another replies, "Like the column." They pull a Soviet conscript from under a stairwell. Hands up, cheeks raw. He says one sentence in a thin voice. "No more bread." The Finn who hears him nods once, not in triumph but in recognition. He hands over half of something that tastes of rye and home. December 30th to 31st complete the pivot. The last Soviet positions in Suomussalmi pull back toward the east, toward the promise of the 44th that grows dimmer with each kilometer. Finns skirt the edges, cutting trails that look like animal tracks, attacking rear guards, and then melting when the Maxims and 45s wake. By the time the New Year's first light tries the sky, the 163rd is no longer a division in any way that a staff manual would recognize. It is Motti's, islands in the snow, each with its own weather and its own calendar of hunger. Siilasvuo reads the moment with the clarity of a man who has been waiting for the fog to thin. He does not shout victory. He would not dare, but he issues an order whose shape the men understand at once. Turn east. Raate Road is a throat in the 44th, is the voice trying to reach through it. The proof of everything they have done and suffered will be written not only in Suomussalmi retaken, but in the annihilation or survival of the relief force. That night, the aurora finally lifts the clouds and walks green across a vault. Men who had not slept in 2 days look up and feel, for a minute, that the sky itself approves a geometry done with skis and patience. Aino lies on his back in a drift and lets the cold nip his face into wakefulness. Ayla passes by with sled, her breath coming in little broken strings, and smiles at it with the flat humor of the exhausted. "East," she says. He nods. The word tastes of iron and pine. The hinge has swung. The village is a ruin held by men who know every stovepipe and fence not by heart. The 163rd is a string of fires that go out when a hand closes over the match. The 44th is coming with everything an army believes will save it. Guns, wagons, trucks, orders, and with everything the force has learned to refuse. January 1st, 1940. Western mouth of Raate Road, near Suomussalmi, Finland. The new year arrives without fireworks. Only a hard sky and a wind that grinds the tops of spruces like a mill. Aino Korhonen stands hip-deep in a snowbank, sawing at a pine with a bow saw whose blade squeals until he oils it with bacon fat. The trunk tips, creaks, and falls across the road with a slow, royal authority. 2 more trees follow, cross-hatched into a roadblock the length of a lorry. Down the line, men drag spike boards and a rough abatis of branches into place, then stamp snow into the gaps. In the ditch, Lieutenant Katunen kneels by a coil of deck cord, laying a charge where the crown of the road dips. He looks up once, east, where the 44th Rifle Division is said to be coming in a bright, long ribbon, and tucks the fuse under his mitten like a man putting a baby to sleep. A runner arrives, face whipped red by the cold. Message from headquarters, he says through chattering teeth. Colonel Siilasvuo, make the road an answer they cannot read. Katunen smiles without warmth. We've been writing all winter, he says. Let them try to read. They feel the 44th before they see it. A distant, steady vibration underfoot like a train 2 valleys away. Then the scouts' reports come in, stitched together out of glimpses. Endless wagons, ZS-5 and GZ-8 trucks hooded against the wind, 76mm field guns towed by horses with frost beards, 26 light tanks with tarps lashed over turrets. The division line of march is a parade carried into a labyrinth. It is doctrine on wheels. It is the idea that mass breaks problems simply by leaning on them hard enough. The Finns have arranged an answer made of silence, timber, and time. Siilasvuo has deployed companies like calipers along the road. Interdiction teams of fell trees at pre-cut guide notches, pioneers with charges for culverts and hummocks, ski detachments lying in snow nests 30 and 50 meters off the crown, each with prearranged fields of fire marked in memory and by faint willow twigs stuck in the drifts. Telephone lines snake low through the brush, pinned under branches to keep them from singing in the wind. At noon, the first advance elements of the 44th nose into the western sectors. Scout platoons with bayonets lowered, boots crunching loud as bones. The Finns let them pass, counting, letting the road swallow its own vanguard. A Maxim opens miles east, and then is still. A 45 millimeters barks, then is wheeled forward by hand like a stubborn child. The day takes on an odd rhythm. Noise far away, then immense quiet up close. When the first wagon train reaches the abattis Eno's crew has built, the drivers pull up, stamping and cursing. A foreman waves men forward with felling axes. He has the uncomplicated courage of a man whose life has always been muscles and wood. He steps toward the wall of green. The snow to his right opens like a mouth. Suomi KP/-31 has chiseled the air, short, disciplined bursts. LS/26S answer from the opposite angle. The overlapping cones crossing at breast height. Horses rear, slew, and crash. The first T, 26 clanks forward to bully the trees aside. Track teeth-chewing branches. It rides onto the hidden charge, and the road heaves, as if the earth has coughed. The tank slams down with a sprung clatter, front bogey splayed, engine screaming high. Men bail out smoking. A Molotov kisses the louvers. Flame runs like handwriting. The Finns fade backward, skis whispering, and the roadblock becomes not a fight, but a fact. This is the test Siilasvuo wanted. Not whether Finns can shoot straighter, but whether geometry can beat arithmetic. The 44th keeps coming because it must, because orders behind orders push at its shoulder. And at each bend, each hollow, another Motti is born. Trees that were cut halfway through fall with a boy's tug on a rope. Charges buried under a snow veneer flip. Sleds like toys. Spike boards take tires, and the lorries slither on their own rims into drifts where wheels spin until rubber peels and slaps like flags. By late afternoon, January 1st, a chain of Soviet subcolumns is strung out across kilometers, separated by felled timber and the black rectangles of burned wagons. They try to clear the obstacles with work parties under machine gun screens, but the Finns drag their engagement range outward, sniping at pack leaders, picking off NCOs who leave cover to shout. In one pocket, a Soviet political officer climbs onto a sled and calls men to form up in ranks. A single Finnish rifle shot snaps past his ear and shatters a lantern at his feet. He flinches, and his men see the flinch. The rank dissolves. That night, the temperature drops like a trap. Thermometers and outposts lose the small red in their glass and fall asleep in their wooden frames. Minus 35 degrees Celsius, maybe worse. The Finns keep their rhythm. 10-minute fires bank behind snow screens, socks rotated like ammunition, oil bottles cradled inside tunics. Ayla Niemi and her stretcher team work as sheltered aid point behind a boulder talus, the stone itself sweating a little warm to those who hug it. She moves among Finns and Soviets without ceremony, warming needles under her tongue when her hands refuse the knack. A teenage conscript, Russian, lips drift blue, whispers mama and grabs her sleeve. She presses a hot stone into his palm and tells him, softly, hold winter, because sometimes a lie is a splint. January 2nd to 3rd become a metronome of ambush, withdrawal, and resealing. The 44th answers with pincer attempts from the ditches, trying to sweep the timberline with skirmish lines. The Finns have prepared refused positions in depth, 2 steps back, diagonals marked by saplings notched with a knife. When the Soviets pour into a gap, the gap becomes a room with the lights off and the furniture rearranged. Maxim bursts rake the wrong snowbank, and the Finns reply from the right one. A Soviet 76 millimeters gets up on its wheels and pounds an evergreen until it looks like the idea of a tree and then falls. The gunners cheer, all warmth is welcome, and then falls silent when nothing else changes. From the east, the 163 RD survivors, pockets who slip the noose, Try meet the 44th halfway. Major Gorokov, beard-rhymed iron filings, shepherds 30 men along a moose trail. 3 rifle between them that still cycle reliably. He finds only silence and the stink of burned oil. He stops at a tree and listens to the road's far-off clatter. He understands, with a soldier's clean fatalism, that the relief he has begged for is trapped in the same grammar. On the afternoon of January 4th, Siilasvuo's staff overlays begin to look like lace. Cuts upon cuts, Motti's name for landmarks and jokes. Horse Yard, Kitchen Hill, Little Moscow. Orders go down the line to tighten every ring a notch at sundown. Ski companies drift in pairs through the twilight like floating punctuation marks. They join a comma to a comma and turn it into a period. At one road loop, Eno's squad slips behind a tangle of wagons, cuts reins and traces, and clucks soft the horses, who follow the warmth of breath. They steal half a dozen out of the pocket before anyone dares shout. In another, a Finnish pioneer crawls up to a field kitchen and, with a gently blasphemous touch of thief taking a relic, lifts the lid to carry off a pot of hot barley. He vanishes into the white, and an hour later, men at an ambush point eat steaming spoonfuls and bless their mothers and the unknown Soviet cook in the same breath. Night of January 5th. The division column is no longer a column. It is a string of bonfires in cold islands, each with a voice that cannot reach the others. The telephone poles that once promised coordination stand with their wires cut, the lines spooled and stolen to lash Finnish polka sleds. An order from a 44TH's headquarters, Commander Vinogradov's signature blotted to a black tear, tells battalions to break out west. The west has become a wall of trees with teeth. Siilasvuo judges a moment as a woodsman judges ice. By the sound under the boot, he issues instruction that is not shouted but passed man to man. Close the pockets. No waste. No frontal swarms. Take prisoners where you can. Keep moving. The proof is not in how loudly you say it, but in how precisely you walk it. January 6th, Epiphany. Dawn arrives like smoke. The Finns begin final reductions. Eno's squad moves on the left lip of a pocket named the Long Yard, where trucks stand radiator to tailboard in a frozen centipede. Grenades first, snapped caps from under the armpit, so fuses don't betray stiff fingers. Rolled under axles, thudding. Then the Suomi speak. Stitching short lines keep heads down while 2 men pour gas oil mix along tarps and touch with matches no bigger than sins. A.T. 26 tries to nose into the drift to give its belly to the fire and smothers itself. Engine coughing to a halt with the pathos of a dying thing. Soviet riflemen rise in 2s and 3s, hands up, exhausted past fear. Eno counts them by habit and points them toward a path flagged with spruce boughs. A Finn there whispers, Rauha, Rauha, and hands around ride biscuit broken in halves. On the right, Ayla follows behind the assault line, stepping from boot hole to boot hole, saving energy, carrying a satchel and a prayer. She finds a Soviet sergeant whose felt boots are frozen to his skin. She cuts them free, the socks leaving with him in a terrible peel, and wraps his feet in wool strips from a coat torn into bandages. He weeps. Not loudly, just leaks water from a body that hasn't enough to spare. She tucks a hot stone into his palm, folds his hand over it, and says, You'll feel the pain come. That means the blood still knows the way. Midday, the decisive block near the border post markers, gray heads of stone peeking from drifts, becomes a choke the 44th cannot pass. The Finns have turned the old customs yard into a killing fan. 2 LS/26S sighted in shallow scoops, a captured Maxim rewired and manned by a Finn who learned its habits in a sawmill, and a 45 millimeters rolled into place with a view down the road as smug as a cat on a sill. When a battery of 7Xs tries to push through, the 45 knocks the lead limber to pieces, and the battery becomes sculpture under the snow, wheels, spokes, and the sudden smallness of men cowering behind things meant for parade ground photographs. A flag appears above a sled, white as everything else, and the men under it stand slowly, hands lifted, mouths open to drink air that doesn't burn. Morning of January 7th breaks on ruin and silence. The last coherent nod of 44th, headquarters wagons, signals trucks, the clerk who has carried his ledger like a holy book of days, faces west and tries to move. They find tree trunks keyed together into a wicker of frozen muscle. They find ditches filled to the lip and stamped flat as floors. They find Finns who have turned a road into a room whose door can be locked from either side. At 8 o'clock, Siilasvuo gives a nod, no ceremony, and a ring of fire rises out of trees, short, precise, like a choir that has trained since autumn. 10 minutes, 20, then pockets sag, then hands appear. Then the quiet comes that soldiers know, the sound of men discovering they have outlived an idea. Aino walks the road, shoulder past trucks mummified in rime, stepped over bodies, horses fallen on their knees as if in prayer. He stops by a field kitchen intact by miracle, opens the lid, finds a gluey porridge half frozen into a pale stone. He tastes it with the end of the spoon and thinks it's the best thing he's eaten in weeks. He ladles bowls for his squad, and on a reflex it feels older than uniforms. Hands the spoon to a prisoner who has been watching as if through glass. The man's hands shake too hard to hold it. Aino curls the prisoner's fingers around the spoon with his own. Ayla moves from fire to fire, from living to almost living. She pulls a Finn's glove off gently. 3 fingers smoke white to a matte, awful sheen, and says nothing, because there's a kind of truth that only silence can stand near. She presses a morphine ampoule against her lips, warms it, snaps, injects. She tucks men into blankets stolen from headquarters wagons lined with stamps and wax seals that mean nothing here. By noon, the 44th Rifle Division is destroyed as a marching, thinking thing. What remains are men with hands up, men without hands, and clerks whose ledgers have recorded their last numbers. Commander Vinogradov is nowhere Aino can see. Rumors ripple. A flight, a capture, a reckoning far from the finish line. But the road holds its counsel. The border markers watch with their blank stone faces and say nothing about which side of a line deserves what. Finnish polka trains move in, pulled by pony teams, to carry away captured rifles, ammunition, food, felt boots, greatcoats, blankets, and, as valuable as any trophy, fuel. Men who were short of everything yesterday are rich today in the fragments of an army that believed quantity was a weapon in itself. Siilasvuo's staff write a figure on a sheet that will go to Helsinki. Guns taken, trucks seized, prisoners counted. But the meaningful number is simpler. The road is empty where it must be empty, and full where the Finns choose to make it full. In the late light, Major Gorokov and his few gaunt men step onto the Raate road from a game trail and stare. He sees the bonfire bones of wagons, the black church bell shape of a burned tank, a Finnish flag tucked like a handkerchief into a spruce, fluttering at the edge of shame and pride. He lowers his head once, as if to a grave he is not certain he'll be allowed to leave. A Finnish private gestures with a rifle barrel, down the side path, toward captivity that promises, at least, heat. Gorokov nods, removes his cap, dusts it of frost, replaces it, and walks. The test is complete, and its grade is written in steam and silence. The forest has proved its theorem. Direction beats mass when winter is a constant. Men who know the trees can erase an army not from the map, but into the map, until a road is only a line of memories. In a shallow hollow, Katunin pours a shot of something that burns like lamp fuel and hands it to Aino. To the proof, he says. Aino drinks and feels the heat draw a thin line from throat to heart. Ayla appears, hair rimed, eyes fierce with the grief of day that saved more than it lost. She takes the cup, sniffs, smiles like a person remembering summer, and passes it on. Above them the sky turns glass blue, and the first star refuses to shiver. Men settle on their packs and watch polka sleds creak under looted warmth. Coats bred boots, not with glee, but with the steadiness of craftsmen who see tools saved from a fire. Somewhere a harmonica starts. It plays badly and perfectly. The tune could be a lullaby or a hymn. It does not matter. What matters is that the road is no longer a road for someone else. Night folds down. The last pocket fires sink to red. Finns stretch under canvas strips, prisoners in long, weary lines curl around their own breath, and the border stones stand as they always have, content to be cold. Over everything floats the exhaustion that comes after impossible things have been done methodically. The men know there is still work. Counting, burying, hauling, mending. There's always work after victory, and sometimes it is the hardest kind. But for 1 hour under an Arctic sky, They sit with the simple knowledge that an idea is held, that a light army on skis, using silence and cold as instruments, can make a much larger army vanish into the trees. January 8th, 1940. Raate Road, near the border stones. Snow falls straight down, the rare gift of a windless morning. Ayla Nimi kneels beside a row of tin cups, set along a board laid over a sled. Steam ascending like prayers no one will claim. Across the road, Eino Korhonen and Lieutenant Katunen stand with a count sheet pinned to a crate. Columns for rifles, machine guns, horses, trucks, tanks, prisoners, the arithmetic of an army unstitched. A line of captured men shuffles past, mittens to mouths, faces gray with the kind of tire that lives in bone. Ayla ladles soup. One dip for us, one dip for them. The ladle rinse in snow between, and Eino catches Katunen's eyes as if to ask a question he can't name. Katunen only nods toward the eastern tree line, where the road dissolves into a whiteness that has no interest in who owned it yesterday. What becomes of a victory that winter helped to write? Body, real-time narrative. The day after the last pockets collapse, the forest returns to its slow grammar. The creak of trunks, the soft crack of frozen sap, the fuzz of falling snow. The Finns set to the second battle. Salvage, burial, counting, and mercy. Polka teams work like ants, hauling ammunition boxes, Maxim tripods, spools of wire, fuel drums still liquid in their hearts. Sappers walk with probe sticks, wary of the charges they themselves planted and did not need. Quartermasters tally anything that warms. Felt boots, sheepskin coats, blankets stamped with Cyrillic letters that mean nothing to cold. The men who have lived on crusts and luck find themselves wealthy in the remains of division. They eat carefully, warned a starving stomach can die of sudden kindness. Out on the road shoulders, Graves details lift shovels into snow that resist the idea of being moved. They mark with spruce boughs where earth will have to wait for a thaw. A chaplain mutters a psalm for a man whose dog tag names a village he will never see again, and then mutters the same psalm for another whose tag he cannot read. Ayla moves between the living and the almost, her kit lighter by the hour, her hands cracked to ribbon. She ties a strip of blue linen around her wrist and laughs when Katunen asks why. So, I remember I'm still the color of home, she says, and he shakes his head like a man who wishes he thought of it. Reports come back from the Mottis that have belonged to the 163rd Rifle Division. Some surrender with stiff politeness. Some fight until a final burst. Some vanish into the tree line in ones and twos to be found days later, the forest gathering them in. Interrogators. A pair of teachers toward whom war has pushed a new set of questions. Asked about supply lines, orders, morale, and here the answers soldiers have been giving since roads were invented. We marched. We waited. We were hungry. A Soviet junior lieutenant, eyes red corners and a face young enough to belong on a bicycle, asks for a pencil and writes in neat block letters, I did not think the trees could be soldiers. For the 9th Division, the victory sits in the hands like a hot stone. Comfort and risk. Colonel Siilasvuo appears everywhere and almost nowhere. A shadow in a doorway with new instruction. A silhouette passing beneath a spruce bough weighted with snow. When he does pause, it is with the same modest exactness that built the battle. Rotate the men. No frostbite to pride. Share the boots before the brandy. He sends telegrams west. Suomussalmi relieved, Raate Road held, material captured beyond any reasonable hope. Household radios in towns far away crackle with the news. And in kitchens blue with smoke mothers weep into aprons because a name they love has not been read aloud in the saddest of tones. The irony walks in under its own white cloak. January deepens, and with it the larger war. Shells digging at the Karelian Isthmus, the long groan of the Mannerheim line on the sustained artillery, the pressure of an enemy with more of almost everything. In the East Woods, a company celebrates by passing around a harmonica and a tin of something sweet stamped with a factory name they can barely pronounce. In the South, field guns answer field guns, and the ground shakes as if distant thunder has chosen a country. The map is the part of reality that does not clear its throat when men cheer. Eino helps lash captured tarps over polka sleds stacked with bread, barley, and canned meat. He writes for Ayla's station, on one with a charcoal stub, and the sergeant grins as if this were the first joke a year. When Eino steals an hour, he walks back along the road alone. The field kitchen smolder. The T-20s sit, like black beehives abandoned at the edge of the field. A horse stands frozen into the posture of bowing, and will be carved free with care, for even in war a beast of work should be thanked. He crouches at a spot where a footprint is filled with new snow, and puts his glove there, as if to test whether the past could be warmed by the fact of the hand that survived it. Ayla's aid point grows uneasily quiet. Proof that the killing is done here and that hard miles away it may not be. She writes names, wraps feet, takes fevers with a thermometer she warms in her own mouth first. A prisoner asks for a scrap of paper. He draws a square of a road through it and a little house and a tree beside the house, and he says the name of his daughter as if it were a place. Ayla folds the paper and slips it into her glove. So someone else will know it, too, she says. Later, when sleep finally comes to her like charity, she dreams that every spruce in Kainuu is hung with such drawings, a forest of small, stubborn maps. The Finnish public, hearing the news in January's thin daylight, stitches together its own meaning. Little against large, craft against mass, skis against steel. The phrase Motti jumps from logging yards into living rooms, woodpile, stack, pocket, a household word repurposed into a tactic. In the capital, editors find the right nouns, annihilated columns, captured guns, a road of ruin. In barracks, men practice skinning into white smocks by touch and speed, laughing at first and then not laughing. In a staff room, someone pins a photograph to a corkboard, trees, snow, a line of men in white with rifles slung, and circles the white space between figures. This is what we learned, the circle seems to say. The gap is a weapon too. The enemy learns as well, and that is the part of victory that tastes of iron. The Red Army will not forget the contempt of winter. It will dress warmer, sledge farther, learn the patience of forests. Later, in other wars, other woods, other months, generals will speak the word rate to remind their staffs that roads lie, that the shortest line between 2 points may be bait, that supply kitchens are hearts and must be hidden like hearts. The Finns have taught a hard lesson to men who paid for it. Lessons paid for seldom allowed to die. Siilasvuo, the colonel whose orders sounded like phrases from a carpenter's book, will climb in rank and carry a quiet with him into rooms where maps make men forget that cold is a noun with teeth. His soldiers will return to farms, workshops, and schoolrooms with new scars and old habits. Some will find that skis on fresh snow still make the same zipper sound, and that it is both comfort and threat. Some will never again sleep on a warm night, without waking to make sure the fire is banked and oil isn't freezing in a metal that isn't there. The war does what wars do. It widens, it narrows, it ends on paper before it ends in bodies. In March, when the armistice comes and men are told to stand down, the line on the map moves in ways that victory on a road could not prevent. Territory is lost. Villages shift from one language to another on official forms. Families fold photographs into envelopes and walk. The irony is not subtle. The army that vanished into trees did not vanish the problem it had been sent to solve. The winter war will sit in memory like a drawing pin under skin. Sharp, real, not fatal, not forgotten. On a last patrol before rotation, Aino, Katunen, and 2 others glide under a sky. So clear the moon's edge looks sharpened. They stop where border stones lift from drifts, heavy and indifferent. Aino touches one, granite, cold, faithful, and thinks of the road that runs east from here into countries he will never see. We cut them into wood piles, he says, the words sounding stranger now that they're over. Katunen scratches his chin. We are reminded the world that winter is a plan if you learn its language, he answers, and then softer, and that men can be decent without being gentle. Back at the aid point, Ayla cleans a kettle until its bottom shines a dull silver. She stows her last morphine ampoule in a tin and ties the blue strip tighter around her wrist. A captured notebook lies open beside her. Neat columns of Soviet supply. Bread, fodder, fuel, soap. She traces a word with a fingertip and thinks about what soldiers really fight for when the slogans grow thin. Warm food, warm feet, warm hands to hold a cup. She closes the book and tucks it under a blanket, as if to keep it from catching cold. By mid-January, the Raate Road is again a road of sorts. The black hulks are towed aside, the burned axles cooling under new drifts. The border post relettered by a soldier with a long brush and a careful hand. Photographers come, the lenses fogging, fingers failing and then recovering between shots. The photos will survive longer than most of the men in them. One picture will hang in a house in Kajani where Ayla visits years later. She will pause, tilt her head, and say to the woman pouring coffee, "The kettle in the corner, that was ours." And the woman will laugh because memory is a stove where everyone cooks what they have and calls it a meal. Night, again, the forest goes back to its trade. A wolf draws a straight line across a gully. A raven lands on a border stone and hops as if reading. Somewhere, a harmonica plays, badly and perfectly, and a soldier, Finnish, Soviet, it hardly matters, turns in his sleep and finds his hands have remembered how to warm themselves without a fire. The legacy of Suomussalmi and the Raate Road lives where strategy and weather meet, where craft lowers its voice and mass leans in to listen. It is a footprint filling with new snow, a ladle pass across a line, a white cloak that made men less visible and more human. Years from now, when someone asks in a classroom why the small refuse the large at certainty, a teacher will draw a narrow road on a board, then surround it with trees, and then dab the chalk here and here and here until the road is just islands. This, the teacher will say, is how some wars are won, not by holding a line, but by unmaking it. The wind lifts barely. The spruce tops whisper the old tongue of Kainu. The cups on Ayla's board cool, and she gathers them one by one, stacking them into a soft tower of tin. Aino's shoulders is packed, the straps dark with a winter's worth of sweat that no wash will ever quite erase. Katunen folds a count sheet and tucks it inside his coat. Not as a souvenir, but as a receipt for a debt paid in discipline and cold. The road that wasn't supposed to be held has been emptied of its threat and filled with a quiet that feels like respect. And the men who made it so step off the crown and back into the trees, where they belong,